The crystal chandelier cast fractured rainbows across the marble floors of the Blackwood estate, its brilliance almost mocking Sophia Martinez as she stood in the doorway of the grand ballroom. At 28, she had learned to navigate these family gatherings like a careful dancer, present but invisible, included but never truly belonging. "Sophia, there you are," called her cousin Miranda, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that always preceded poison. "We were just talking about the charity auction next month. Of course, we'll need someone to handle the logistics." The way Miranda said logistics made it clear she meant the grunt work, the unglamorous tasks that kept Sophia busy while the real family members basked in the spotlight of their philanthropic endeavors. Sophia forced a smile, her dark eyes scanning the room filled with her relatives. The Blackwood family had money that stretched back generations, old Boston wealth that came with expectations and unspoken rules. "I'd be happy to help," Sophia replied, though her stomach churned with familiar resentment. She caught her reflection in one of the gilt-framed mirrors lining the walls, her olive complexion and dark hair standing out starkly against the sea of pale faces and blonde highlights that dominated the family photos adorning every surface. Wonderful. Miranda's laugh tinkled like broken glass. "You're so good at organizing things. It's probably because you're more practical than the rest of us." The coded language wasn't lost on Sophia. Practical meant working class. Different meant not really one of them. She had heard these subtle digs her entire life, growing up in the shadow of the Blackwood legacy while living in a modest apartment with her mother, Elena, who worked as a seamstress to make ends meet. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was the only family member with an actual job, working as a social worker in downtown Boston, helping families navigate the system while her cousins flitted between yoga classes and charity luncheons. But that practical work had given her something her relatives lacked: real connection to the world beyond their gilded cage. "Sophia, darling, come here," called her grandfather, Theodore Blackwood, from his leather armchair by the fireplace. At 86, he commanded attention even while seated, his silver hair perfectly styled, and his steel blue eyes sharp as ever. Despite the family's subtle ostracism, Grandfather Theodore had always treated her with a warmth that confused and comforted her in equal measure. She approached him, aware of the whispers that followed her movement across the room. Her Uncle Richard and Aunt Catherine huddled near the piano, their heads bent together in conversation that stopped abruptly when she passed. Her cousins, Miranda, James, and David, watched her with expressions that mixed condescension with something else she couldn't quite identify. Suspicion? Fear? "Tell me about your work," Theodore said, patting the arm of the chair beside him. "I want to hear about the Henderson case you mentioned last month." Sophia settled into the chair, grateful for his genuine interest. For the next 20 minutes, she found herself relaxing as she described her recent success, helping a single mother secure housing assistance. Theodore listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed he remembered details from their previous conversations. "You have your grandmother's heart," he said softly, his eyes distant with memory. "Margaret would have been so proud of the woman you've become." The comment sent a ripple of tension through the nearby family members. Sophia had heard whispers about her grandmother Margaret her entire life, always spoken in hushed tones, always accompanied by meaningful glances in her direction. Margaret had died when Sophia was just 5, but she remembered fragments: gentle hands braiding her hair, stories told in accented English, and a warmth that felt like home. "Grandfather," Miranda interrupted, appearing at Theodore's elbow with a fresh drink. "We should probably discuss the foundation board meeting next week. There are some important decisions that need to be made by family members." The emphasis on family members hit Sophia like a slap. She started to rise, but Theodore's hand caught her wrist. "Sophia is family," he said firmly, his voice carrying the authority that had built a business empire. "She has as much right to be involved in family decisions as anyone in this room." "Of course she does," Uncle Richard interjected smoothly, moving closer to the group. But let's be realistic, Dad. Sophia has her own life, her own career. She doesn't need to be burdened with the complexities of family business. Burdened? Theodore's eyebrows rose dangerously. Is that what you think our family legacy is? A burden? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Sophia felt the familiar churning in her stomach that came whenever she found herself at the center of family tension. She had learned over the years that these moments never ended well for her. That's not what I meant, Richard backpedaled quickly. I just think Sophia has enough on her plate without worrying about board meetings and inheritance planning. Inheritance planning. The words slipped out before Sophia could stop them. She had never been included in any discussions about the family's financial future, another reminder of her outsider status. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Sophia watched as her relatives exchanged loaded glances, entire conversations happening in the space between their eyes. Her chest tightened with familiar anxiety. Well, Catherine said with forced brightness, perhaps this isn't the best time for such serious discussions. Sophia, would you mind helping me in the kitchen? I think the caterers need some direction. It was a dismissal disguised as a request, and everyone in the room knew it. Sophia felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but she nodded and started toward the kitchen. As she walked away, she heard Theodore's voice, sharp with disapproval. That girl is worth more than the lot of you combined, he said quietly, but not quietly enough. And someday you'll realize what you've lost. In the kitchen, Sophia busied herself arranging hors d'oeuvres on silver platters, her hands shaking slightly with suppressed emotion. The catering staff worked around her efficiently, their professional demeanor a stark contrast to the emotional minefield she had just navigated. You okay, honey? Asked Maria, the head caterer, who had worked several Blackwood events over the years. You look like you could use some air. Sophia managed a grateful smile. Just family stuff. You know how it is. Maria nodded knowingly. Rich families are the worst. All that money, and they still find ways to make each other miserable. The simple observation hit closer to home than Sophia cared to admit. She had grown up on the periphery of immense wealth, close enough to see its benefits, but far enough away to feel its absence acutely. Her mother, Elena, had worked multiple jobs to keep Sophia in decent clothes and a good school district, pride preventing her from accepting more than the occasional gift from Theodore. Miss Martinez? A young server approached hesitantly. Your grandfather is asking for you. He's in his study. Sophia dried her hands and made her way through the familiar corridors of the Blackwood mansion. The study was Theodore's sanctuary, lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books and filled with the comfortable smell of old paper and expensive cigars. He stood by the window, looking out at the meticulously maintained gardens. Grandfather, you wanted to see me? He turned, and Sophia was struck by how tired he looked. The vitality that had carried him through decades of business success seemed dimmed, replaced by something that looked almost like regret. Sit down, my dear. There are things I need to tell you, things I should have shared years ago. Sophia settled into the familiar leather chair across from his desk, the same chair where she had done homework as a child while her mother worked late. Theodore seemed to be wrestling with something, his usually decisive demeanor replaced by uncharacteristic hesitation. Your grandmother Margaret, he began slowly. She made me promise something before she died. She made me swear that I would always take care of you, always make sure you knew you belonged in this family. I know I belong, Sophia said softly, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Theodore's smile was sad. Do you? Because I've watched my own children and grandchildren treat you like an inconvenience for 28 years, and I've been too much of a coward to stop it. The admission hung between them like a bridge. Neither was sure they should cross. Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally hearing someone acknowledge what she had experienced her entire life. they think. I don't notice, Theodore continued. The way they exclude you from family decisions. The way they treat you like hired help at gatherings like this. But I see everything, Sophia. And I remember what Margaret told me about family, about blood, about the things that really matter. Before Sophia could respond, the study door burst open. Miranda stood in the doorway, her face flushed with wine and indignation. Grandfather, we need to talk about the foundation budget. And Uncle Richard says... She stopped short, noticing Sophia. Oh, I didn't realize you were having a private meeting. The word private dripped with accusation, as if Sophia's presence in the study was somehow inappropriate. Theodore's expression hardened. Sophia and I are discussing family matters, he said coldly. Something you might want to familiarize yourself with, considering your own involvement in family business. Miranda's laugh was sharp and bitter. Family matters? With her? She gestured at Sophia dismissively. Come on, grandfather. We all know. Sophia isn't really what? Theodore's voice was dangerously quiet. Miranda seemed to realize she had crossed a line, but the wine had loosened her tongue past the point of caution. She isn't really family, is she? I mean, everyone knows she's adopted. Mom told me years ago. Sophia's mother, Elena, worked for us, and when she got pregnant, you and grandmother Margaret took pity on her. That's why Sophia looks so different from the rest of us. The words hit Sophia like physical blows. The room seemed to spin as pieces of her life rearranged themselves into this new, horrible configuration. The whispers. The exclusion. The way her mother always grew quiet when Sophia asked about her father. Miranda! Theodore's voice cracked like a whip. How dare you? It's true, isn't it? Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. She stood on unsteady legs, her entire world tilting off its axis. That's why I never fit in. That's why everyone treats me like I don't belong. Because I don't. She looked at Theodore, searching his face for denial, for outrage, for anything that would contradict Miranda's cruel revelation. Instead, she saw guilt and sorrow and the terrible weight of long-kept secrets. Sophia, please, he said softly. Let me explain. But Sophia was already moving, pushing past Miranda and out of the study. The mansion's opulent hallways blurred together as she ran toward the exit, her heart pounding with humiliation and betrayal. Behind her, she could hear Theodore calling her name. But she couldn't stop, couldn't face the pity in his eyes or the triumph in Miranda's. The October evening. Air was crisp against her face as she stumbled into the circular driveway. Her mother's old Honda looked pathetically out of place among the luxury cars parked in perfect rows. Sophia fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking so badly she dropped them twice before managing to unlock the door. As she drove away from the Blackwood estate, Sophia caught a glimpse of Theodore in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway with his shoulders slumped in defeat. The sight of him looking so broken almost made her turn around. But the weight of Miranda's words pressed down on her like a physical force. Adopted. The word echoed in her mind as she navigated the familiar streets of Boston. Everything made sense now. The subtle ostracism, the careful exclusion from family decisions, the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. She had spent her entire life trying to prove she belonged to a family that had never truly accepted her, because she wasn't really theirs. By the time she reached her small apartment in Cambridge, Sophia's shock had crystallized into something harder and more painful. Rage. Rage at the lies, at the wasted years of trying to fit in, at the family who had let her believe she was one of them while treating her like an outsider. She climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. Inside, the modest space felt like a sanctuary after the oppressive grandeur of the Blackwood mansion. Her furniture was second-hand but comfortable, her walls decorated with photos of the families she had helped through her work, rather than portraits of ancestors she had never truly shared. Sophia sank onto her couch and pulled out her phone, staring at her mother's number in her contacts. Elena deserved to know that the secret was out, that Sophia had finally learned the truth about her origins. But as her finger hovered over the call button, Sophia found herself frozen. What would she say? How do you confront the person who raised you about a lie that had shaped your entire existence? Instead, she set the phone aside and stared out her window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there was her real family, people who might actually want her, who might see her as more than a charity case or a burden to be managed. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. For 28 years, Sophia had tried to earn her place in the Blackwood family through good grades, hard work, and unwavering loyalty. She had endured their subtle slights and accepted their conditional love because she believed she had no choice. But now, sitting in her own space surrounded by the life she had built with her own hands, Sophia realized something profound. She didn't need their acceptance anymore. The revelation should have been devastating, but instead, it felt like the first deep breath she had taken in years. 3 weeks had passed since Sophia walked out of the Blackwood mansion, and in that time, she had built walls around her heart that seemed impenetrable. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from Theodore, text messages from her mother Elena, and even a few awkward voicemails from Uncle Richard attempting damage control. She ignored them all. The October air had grown colder, and Boston was painted in the brilliant reds and golds of autumn. Sophia threw herself into her work with renewed intensity, channeling her emotional turmoil into helping other families navigate their crises. At least at the Department of Children and Families, her worth was measured by her competence and compassion, not by bloodlines or social standing. "Sophia, you've been here until 9 o'clock every night this week," said her supervisor, Janet, appearing in the doorway of Sophia's cubicle. "Whatever's going on in your personal life, you can't solve it by working yourself to death." Sophia looked up from the Henderson case file she had been reviewing for the 3rd time. Janet's concerned expression reminded her that she had people who cared about her, people who valued her for who she was, not who she was supposed to be. "I'm fine, Janet. Just trying to get caught up on paperwork." "Bullshit," Janet said, with the directness that had made her Sophia's favorite supervisor. "You look like you haven't slept in days, and Maria Henderson called to thank me for the angel who saved her family. She said you found them emergency housing in less than 24 hours and connected them with job training programs. That's not catching up on paperwork. That's running from something." Sophia's eyes burned with unshed tears. The Henderson case had been particularly close to her heart. A single mother struggling to keep her children together while battling an unforgiving system. Sophia had seen herself in Maria's determination to protect her family, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. "Family stuff," Sophia said quietly. "I found out some things that changed everything." Janet pulled up a chair, her expression softening. "Want to talk about it?" Before Sophia could answer, her phone buzzed with yet another call from Theodore. She declined it automatically, but not before Janet noticed the contact name on the screen. Theodore. Blackwood? As in Blackwood Industries? "Sophia, are you related to the Blackwoods?" The question hit Sophia like a physical blow. Even Janet's surprise felt like another reminder of her outsider status. The shock that someone like Sophia could be connected to Boston's elite families. "It's complicated," Sophia said, her voice tight. "I thought I was. Turns out I'm not." She found herself telling Janet the whole story. The years of subtle exclusion, Miranda's cruel revelation, the devastating realization that her entire identity had been built on a lie. Janet listened without judgment, her anger growing visibly as Sophia described the treatment she had endured. "Those people are monsters," Janet said when Sophia finished. "To let you grow up feeling like you didn't belong, to watch you struggle for acceptance when they knew the truth all along. That's psychological abuse, Sophia. The words struck Sophia with unexpected force. In all her years of helping families, she had become expert at recognizing the signs of emotional manipulation and trauma. But she had never applied that lens to her own experience, never considered that the Blackwoods treatment might constitute a form of abuse. The grandfather seems to care about you, though, Janet continued. From what you've described, he's been trying to protect you from the rest of them. He lied to me too, Sophia said bitterly. For 28 years he let me believe I belonged to a family that never wanted me. Or maybe he was trying to give you what he thought you needed. A family, a sense of belonging. Sometimes the people who love us make the wrong choices for the right reasons. Before Sophia could respond, her phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Theodore's number on the screen. It was her mother's. Sophia stared at the device, torn between her need for answers and her fear of more painful truths. "Take it," Janet said, gently. "You can't run forever." Sophia answered the call with trembling fingers. "Mom?" "Sophia, thank God. I've been so worried. Theodore told me what happened at the party, and Elena's voice broke. "We need to talk, Mija. Please. There are things you need to know." The endearment, one Elena had used throughout Sophia's childhood, sent a wave of longing through her. Despite everything, this woman had raised her, loved her, sacrificed for her. Whatever lies had been told, Elena's love had been real. "I'll come over tonight," Sophia said quietly. "I'll make dinner. Your favorite, chicken and rice with those black beans you love." After ending the call, Sophia sat in her cubicle feeling emotionally drained. Janet squeezed her shoulder supportively. "Whatever you find out tonight, remember that you're one of the strongest people I know. You've survived their rejection and built a life that matters. That's not nothing, Sophia. That's everything." The evening air was crisp as Sophia walked up the steps to her mother's apartment in Somerville. The small 2-bedroom unit had been home for most of Sophia's childhood, and it still smelled like the mixture of fabric softener and Elena's favorite vanilla candles. The familiarity was both comforting and unsettling. Elena opened the door before Sophia could knock, her face etched with worry and guilt. At 52, she was still beautiful, her dark hair showing only hints of silver, and her brown eyes, so similar to Sophia's, bright with unshed tears. "My baby," Elena whispered, pulling Sophia into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." They stood in the doorway holding each other, years of unspoken pain and love flowing between them. When they finally separated, Sophia saw that Elena had been crying. "Come, eat," Elena said, leading her to the small dining table where she had set out Sophia's favorite meal. "We have a lot to talk about." They ate in relative silence, the weight of impending conversation heavy between them. Sophia studied her mother's face, looking for signs of deception or guilt. But all she saw was love and regret. "Tell me the truth," Sophia said finally. "All of it. No more secrets." Elena set down her fork and took a deep breath. "You're not adopted. Mija, you never were." The words hit Sophia like a thunderbolt. "What?" But Miranda said, "Miranda is a foolish girl who knows nothing about the real history of her family," Elena said fiercely. She heard whispers and rumors and twisted them into cruel lies. Sophia's mind reeled. Then why have they always treated me like I don't belong? Elena's expression grew pained. Because of me. Because of choices I made when I was young. And desperate. She reached across the table and took Sophia's hands. "Your father is Richard Blackwood." The revelation hit Sophia like a physical blow. Uncle Richard, cold, dismissive Uncle Richard who had spent years treating her like an inconvenience, was her father. "Richard?" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. "But he's married to Catherine. He has 3 children." "He wasn't married when we met," Elena said quietly. I was 19, working as a seamstress in the Blackwood household. Richard was 25, fresh out of law school and full of charm. I was young and stupid and thought he loved me. The story spilled out in painful detail. Elena had been an employee in the Blackwood household, one of many young women who worked to maintain the family's pristine lifestyle. Richard had seduced her with promises of love and a future together, but when Elena became pregnant, he panicked. His parents were furious, Elena continued. The family was negotiating a business merger that depended on Richard marrying Catherine Morrison. A pregnant employee threatened to destroy everything. So what happened? Sophia asked, though she was beginning to understand. Theodore and Margaret intervened. They offered me money to disappear, to never name Richard as the father. But Margaret, she was different from the rest of them. She had a heart. Elena's voice grew soft with memory. She convinced me to stay, to let you be raised as part of the family. She promised that you would never want for anything, that you would have opportunities I could never give you. But I was never really accepted, Sophia said bitterly, because Richard was terrified you would threaten his marriage, his position in the family business. Catherine suspected the truth. She wasn't stupid. So they all agreed to treat you as a charity case, a poor relation they were graciously helping. It was easier than admitting the truth. Sophia felt sick. And you let them? You let them treat me like that for 28 years? Elena's tears flowed freely now. I was young and scared and alone. Theodore paid for our apartment, for your education, for everything we needed. But the price was silence. I had to pretend you were just a family friend they were helping. I watched them exclude you and hurt you, and I said nothing because I was terrified they would take you away from me entirely. The enormity of the deception was staggering. Sophia's entire life had been built on a lie designed to protect Richard's reputation and social standing. She was the dirty secret that had to be managed and contained. Does anyone else know the truth? Sophia asked. Theodore knows. He's always known. That's why he's been so protective of you. Why he's tried to include you in family decisions. Margaret knew too, and she made him promise to take care of you before she died. And Richard? Does he know I know? Elena shook her head. No one knows except Theodore and me. And now you. Sophia sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the implications. She wasn't the adopted outsider she had believed herself to be. She was Richard's daughter, which made her as much a Blackwood as Miranda, James, and David. More than that, she was Theodore's granddaughter, with as much claim to the family legacy as any of them. What am I supposed to do with this? Sophia asked. How am I supposed to face them knowing what I know? I don't know, Mija, Elena said honestly. But I know that you're stronger than all of them. You've built a life that matters, helped families, made a difference in the world. They've done nothing but live off money they never earned. Sophia thought about her cousins, Miranda with her charity luncheons and shopping trips, James with his failed business ventures funded by family money, David with his expensive hobbies and lack of direction. None of them had ever held a real job or contributed anything meaningful to society. They're going to hate me even more when they find out, Sophia said. Let them hate you, Elena said fiercely. You owe them nothing. They've had 28 years to treat you with respect and kindness, and they chose cruelty instead. Now you hold a truth that changes everything. As Sophia drove home that night, her mind raced with possibilities. For the first time in her life, she held power over the family that had spent decades diminishing her. She was Richard's daughter, Theodore's granddaughter, and a legitimate heir to the Blackwood fortune. But more than that, she was finally free from the weight of trying to earn their acceptance. She no longer needed to prove herself worthy of their love, because she understood now that their rejection had never been about her worthiness. It had been about their shame and fear. The question now was what to do with this newfound knowledge. Sophia could expose Richard's hypocrisy, demand her rightful place in the family, or simply walk away with the satisfaction of knowing the truth. Each option carried its own risks and rewards. As she pulled into her apartment complex, Sophia made a decision. She would wait. She would watch. And when the time was right, she would use the truth like a scalpel, cutting away the lies that had shaped her life and revealing the reality beneath. The Blackwood family had spent 28 years underestimating her. That was about to change. 2 months after Elena's revelation, Sophia had settled into an uneasy peace with her new reality. She threw herself into her work, helping families navigate the complex web of social services while processing her own family's deceptions. The truth about her parentage had become a secret weapon she wasn't sure she would ever use, until Theodore Blackwood collapsed during a board meeting on a cold December morning. Sophia learned of his hospitalization through a text from Elena. "Theodore in Mass General, heart attack, thought you should know." She stared at the message for a long time, sitting in her cubicle while her colleagues bustled around her with their usual purposeful energy. Despite everything, the lies, the secrets, the years of manipulation, Theodore had been the one constant source of warmth in her relationship with the Blackwood family. The thought of losing him felt like losing the last anchor to her past. Janet appeared at her desk, taking one look at Sophia's face and immediately understanding. "Go," she said simply. "Whatever it is, go." Massachusetts General Hospital was a maze of sterile corridors and anxious families. Sophia navigated to the cardiac intensive care unit, her heart pounding with each step. She half expected to be turned away. After all, she had spent the last 2 months avoiding all contact with the Blackwoods. But when she approached the nurse's station, the elderly woman behind the desk smiled warmly. "You must be Sophia," she said. "Mr. Blackwood has been asking for you. Room 314. Sophia's steps slowed as she approached the room. Through the glass partition, she could see Theodore lying in the hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than she had ever seen him. Machines beeped softly around him, and an oxygen cannula rested under his nose. But his eyes were alert, and when he saw her, his face lit up with genuine joy. "Sophia," he whispered as she entered the room. "I wasn't sure you would come." She approached the bed carefully, noting how the hospital gown made his usually commanding presence seem diminished. "How are you feeling?" "Like an old fool who waited too long to fix his mistakes," Theodore said with a weak smile. "The doctors say I'm stable, but at my age, stable is a relative term." Sophia pulled up a chair beside his bed, surprised by how natural it felt to be there. Despite everything that had happened, this man had been a grandfather to her in ways that transcended blood and secrets. "I'm sorry I haven't called," she said quietly. "After what Miranda said, I needed time to process everything." Theodore's expression grew pained. Miranda had no right to say what she did, and more importantly, she had no right to speak about things she doesn't understand. But she was right, wasn't she? About me being different, about not really belonging. Theodore's hand found hers, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who had just survived a heart attack. "Sophia, you belong more than any of them. You have your grandmother's heart, your mother's strength, and a moral compass that the rest of my family seems to have lost somewhere along the way." Before Sophia could respond, the door opened and Richard Blackwood entered, followed by Catherine and their 3 children. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as the family processed Sophia's presence. "Dad," Richard said carefully, his eyes fixed on Sophia with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I didn't expect to find everyone here." "Sophia is my granddaughter," Theodore said firmly, his voice carrying more strength than his physical condition suggested. "She has every right to be here." The word granddaughter hung in the air like a challenge. Sophia watched as Richard's face went pale, while Catherine's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Miranda, James, and David exchanged glances that were loaded with meaning. "Of course she does," Catherine said smoothly, but her smile was razor-sharp. "We're all family here." The false warmth in her voice made Sophia's skin crawl. These people had perfected the art of saying one thing while meaning another, of wielding politeness like a weapon. "Actually," Sophia said, standing up, "I should go. I just wanted to make sure you were okay, grandfather." "Please stay," Theodore said, his grip on her hand tightening. "There are things we need to discuss as a family." "What kind of things?" Richard asked, his lawyer's instincts clearly on high alert. Before Theodore could answer, a doctor entered the room, breaking the tension with his professional demeanor. Dr. Patel was a small, efficient man with kind eyes and the sort of calm competence that immediately inspired confidence. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm pleased to say that your test results are encouraging. However, I need to discuss some important information with you and your family about your ongoing care." "Doctor," Theodore said, "this is my entire family. Please speak freely." Dr. Patel glanced around the room, his gaze lingering on Sophia with mild curiosity before continuing. "The heart attack was significant, but you responded well to treatment. However, at your age, the risk of another cardiac event is considerable. You'll need to make some lifestyle changes, reduce stress, and we'll want to monitor you closely." "How closely?" Richard asked, his question carrying an undercurrent of concern that seemed more financial than familial. "I'd recommend avoiding any major stressors for the next few months. No extensive travel, no high-pressure business decisions, no family conflicts." The doctor's last point was delivered with the knowing look of someone who had seen too many families torn apart by medical crises. After the doctor left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Sophia could feel the weight of unspoken tensions, the careful dance of family members who were more concerned with positioning than with Theodore's health. "Dad," Richard said carefully, "maybe this is a good time to discuss some practical matters. The business, your estate planning, making sure everything is in order." Theodore's laugh was bitter. "Estate planning? Richard, I've been planning my estate for decades. The question is whether my family is ready to hear about those plans." "What do you mean?" Miranda asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "I mean that I've been watching all of you for years, seeing how you treat each other, how you handle responsibility, how you use the advantages you've been given." Theodore's gaze swept the room, landing on each family member in turn. "And I've made decisions based on what I've observed." Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. Something in Theodore's tone suggested that his observations had not been favorable to most of the people in the room. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Catherine suggested, her eyes pointedly excluding Sophia from the definition of "we." "No," Theodore said firmly. "Sophia stays. She's as much a part of this family as anyone else in this room, and she deserves to hear what I have to say." The assertion sent a ripple of unease through the family. Sophia saw Richard's hands clench into fists, noticed the way Miranda's breathing became shallow and rapid. They were afraid, she realized. Afraid of what Theodore might reveal, afraid of how it might affect their comfortable positions in the family hierarchy. "Theodore," Richard said, his voice taking on the tone he used in court, "you've just suffered a major medical event. This might not be the best time for family discussions that could be upsetting." "I'm dying, Richard," Theodore said bluntly. "Not today, maybe not this year, but soon enough. And before I go, I'm going to make sure that the people who deserve my legacy actually receive it." The words hit the room like a bomb. Sophia saw the naked fear in her cousin's eyes, the way Catherine's mask of composure finally slipped, the way Richard's face went from pale to gray. "Dad, you're going to be fine," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The doctor said you responded well to treatment." "The doctor said I need to avoid stress," Theodore replied. And nothing causes me more stress than watching my family destroy itself with greed and petty jealousies. He turned to Sophia, his expression softening. Which is why I need to ask you something, my dear. Will you forgive an old man for the mistakes he's made? Will you let me try to make things right? Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes. Grandfather, you don't need to. I do need to, he interrupted. I've let my family treat you poorly for too long. I've enabled their cruelty because I was afraid of the consequences of telling the truth. But I'm not afraid anymore. What truth? Miranda demanded, her voice shrill with panic. Theodore's smile was enigmatic. All truths have their time, Miranda, and that time is coming soon. Before anyone could respond, a nurse entered to check Theodore's vitals, effectively ending the conversation. But as Sophia gathered her things to leave, she caught Theodore's eye, and he mouthed 2 words that sent electricity through her veins. Be ready. Over the following weeks, Theodore's health fluctuated like a tide. Some days he was strong enough to conduct business from his hospital bed. Other days he slept fitfully, his breathing labored and his skin ashen. Sophia visited regularly, often arriving to find the room empty of other family members who seemed more interested in discussing his condition than actually spending time with him. During one of these quiet visits, Theodore asked her about her work, listening intently as she described a particularly challenging case involving a teenager aging out of foster care. You could have been that girl, he said softly when she finished. If Elena hadn't been so strong, if I hadn't intervened, you could have been lost in the system. Maybe, Sophia said. But I think Elena would have found a way to take care of me regardless. She's stronger than any of us realized. She is, Theodore agreed. And so are you. That's why I need you to promise me something. Sophia waited, sensing the gravity in his tone. When the time comes, and it will come soon, I need you to be strong, enough to claim what's rightfully yours. Don't let them intimidate you, or make you feel like you don't deserve it. You've earned your place in this family through kindness and integrity, not through accidents of birth. Grandfather, what are you planning? His smile was mysterious. Justice, my dear. Simply justice. 3 days later, Theodore Blackwood died, peacefully in his sleep. Sophia learned of his death through a phone call from Elena at 6 a.m. She sat on the edge of her bed, still in her pajamas, trying to process the loss of the man who had been her strongest connection to the Blackwood family. The funeral is Thursday, Elena said gently. I think you should go. I don't know if I can face them, Sophia admitted, especially now when they're grieving. You have as much right to grieve as they do, Elena said firmly. More, perhaps. He loved you, Mija. Don't let fear keep you from saying goodbye. The funeral was held at Boston's most prestigious Episcopal church, a Gothic stone monument to old money and older traditions. Sophia arrived early, wearing her only black dress, AI, simple, elegant piece she had bought for job interviews. She felt underdressed among the sea of designer mourning wear, but she held her head high as she took a seat in the back of the church. The sanctuary filled quickly with Boston's elite, business leaders, politicians, and social figures who had orbited Theodore's world for decades. Sophia recognized many faces from newspaper society pages and charity event photos, people who had known Theodore as a titan of industry rather than as a grandfather. The Blackwood family occupied the first 3 rows, their grief on display like another expensive accessory. Richard delivered a eulogy that painted Theodore as a visionary businessman and devoted family man, carefully omitting any mention of the tensions that had defined the family's final months. My father believed in family above all else, Richard said, his voice carrying to the back of the church. He taught us that blood is thicker than water, that loyalty to family should guide all our decisions. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia. Richard was speaking about family loyalty, while having spent decades denying his own daughter's existence. After the service, Sophia lingered in the back as the congregation filed out. She wanted to pay her respects to Theodore's memory without having to navigate the complicated social dynamics of the reception. But as she prepared to leave, a hand touched her shoulder. "Ms. Martinez?" The voice belonged to a distinguished man, in his 60s, with silver hair and intelligent gray eyes. "I'm Harold Whitman, Mr. Blackwood's attorney. He asked me to speak with you after the service." Sophia's heart began to race. "About what?" "The reading of his will. It's scheduled for tomorrow at 2:00 in my office. Mr. Blackwood was very specific that you should be present." The word sent a chill through Sophia. "Are you sure? I wouldn't expect to be included in his estate planning." Harold's smile was knowing. Mr. Blackwood was very clear about who should be present for the reading. "I suggest you don't miss it." That evening, Sophia called Elena to tell her about the invitation to the will reading. "He's going to acknowledge you," Elena said with certainty. "After all these years, he's finally going to tell the truth." "What if I don't want the truth to come out like this?" Sophia asked. "What if I'm not ready for everyone to know?" "Are you ready to let them continue treating you like an outsider forever?" Elena countered. "Theodore is giving you a gift, Mija. The gift of truth and recognition. Don't throw it away because you're afraid." The next afternoon, Sophia stood outside Harold Whitman's law office in downtown Boston, her hands trembling slightly as she checked her reflection in the building's glass doors. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a navy blue suit that projected professionalism without ostentation, minimal jewelry, and her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wanted to look like someone who belonged in a lawyer's office, someone who deserved to be there. The law office was everything Sophia expected from Boston's old money legal establishment. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and an atmosphere of hushed reverence for wealth and tradition. Harold's secretary led her to a conference room where the Blackwood family was already assembled. The tension in the room was palpable. Richard sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his face grave and his posture rigid. Catherine flanked him on one side, while Miranda, James, and David occupied chairs with the nervous energy of people awaiting judgment. They all looked up when Sophia entered, their expressions ranging from surprise to outright hostility. "What is she doing here?" Miranda demanded, her voice sharp with indignation. "Ms. Martinez is here at Mr. Blackwood's specific request," Harold said smoothly, gesturing for Sophia to take a seat. "Shall we begin?" Sophia chose a chair near the end of the table, close enough to hear clearly, but far enough to avoid direct confrontation. She could feel the weight of their stares, the unspoken questions about her presence at such an intimate family moment. Harold opened a leather portfolio and withdrew a thick document bound in blue legal backing. "This is the last will and testament of Theodore Blackwood, executed 6 months ago and properly witnessed according to Massachusetts law." 6 months ago. Sophia's mind raced, trying to remember what had been happening in the family 6 months earlier. That would have been just after the spring charity gala, when Miranda had made particularly cruel comments about Sophia's appropriate role in family functions. "The will is quite detailed," Harold continued, "but I'll summarize the major provisions. First, Mr. Blackwood has made generous charitable donations to several organizations, including a substantial endowment to the Boston Children's Hospital. Murmurs of approval went around the table. Charitable giving was expected from Boston's elite families, a way of maintaining social standing while reducing tax obligations. Second, he has provided for various household staff and long-term employees with pension funds and retirement benefits. More nods of approval. Taking care of loyal employees was another hallmark of proper family behavior. Third, regarding family members. Harold paused, his eyes scanning the faces around the table. Mr. Blackwood has made the following provisions. The room fell silent except for the soft ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. To my son Richard Blackwood, I leave the sum of $500,000 and my collection of first edition books, with the hope that he will finally find the wisdom that has eluded him for most of his adult life. Richard's face went white. $500,000 was a significant sum to most people, but it was a fraction of what he would have expected to inherit from one of Boston's wealthiest families. To my daughter-in-law, Catherine Blackwood, I leave my wife's jewelry collection and the sum of $200,000, with gratitude for her years of service to the family's social obligations. Catherine's mouth fell open in shock. The jewelry was valuable, but again, this was far less than she had anticipated. To my grandchildren, Miranda, James, and David Blackwood, I leave equal shares of $1 million to be held in trust until they reach the age of 35, with distributions contingent upon their pursuit of meaningful employment or education. The three cousins erupted in protests. Miranda's voice rose above the others. Contingent upon employment? What does that mean? Harold consulted the document. It means that each grandchild must demonstrate to the trustee, which would be this law firm, that they are engaged in productive work or educational pursuits. Sitting on charity boards or managing trust funds does not qualify as meaningful employment. This is outrageous, James sputtered. Grandfather can't control our lives. From beyond the grave. Actually, he can, Harold said mildly. Conditional bequests are perfectly legal, provided they don't violate public policy. Sophia sat in stunned silence, watching her cousins' comfortable futures crumble before their eyes. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Theodore's biggest revelation was yet to come. Now, Harold continued, regarding the bulk of Mr. Blackwood's estate, including Blackwood Industries, the family home, and his remaining assets valued at approximately $50 million. The room held its collective breath. This was the moment that would determine the future of the Blackwood family dynasty. Mr. Blackwood has left everything to his granddaughter, Sophia Martinez, with the following explanation in his own words. Harold cleared his throat and began to read. Sophia has shown throughout her life the qualities that built our family fortune: integrity, compassion, hard work, and genuine concern for others. While my other heirs have lived off the fruits of previous generations' labor, Sophia has built a life of service and meaning. She alone among my descendants has earned the right to carry on the Blackwood legacy. The words hit the room like a physical force. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face as the magnitude of Theodore's decision became clear. She was inheriting everything: the business, the mansion, the investment portfolios, everything the Blackwood family had built over generations. This is impossible, Richard shouted, jumping to his feet. Sophia isn't even a real member of this family. She's adopted. There's no blood relation. Harold's eyebrows rose slightly. I'm afraid that's not accurate, Mr. Blackwood. According to the documentation in Mr. Theodore Blackwood's possession, Ms. Martinez is indeed his biological granddaughter. The lawyer opened another folder and withdrew a DNA test result. This paternity test, conducted 18 months ago, confirms that Sophia Martinez is the biological daughter of Richard Blackwood, making her a legitimate heir to the family fortune. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia stared at the document in Harold's hands, realizing that Theodore had known the truth all along. Not just suspected it, but had scientific proof of her parentage. Richard's face cycled through a range of emotions: shock, denial, fear, and finally, a desperate kind of rage. That's impossible. I never consented to any DNA test. Mr. Theodore Blackwood was quite resourceful, Harold said diplomatically. Hair from a brush, saliva from a water glass. DNA can be extracted from many sources. Catherine turned to stare at her husband with dawning horror. Richard, is this true? Is Sophia your daughter? Before Richard could answer, Miranda's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You bastard! You let us treat her like garbage for years, knowing she was our half-sister? I didn't know, Richard protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I mean, I suspected, but I never knew for certain. Bullshit, James yelled. You knew. That's why you were always so uncomfortable around her. Why you tried so hard to keep her away from family decisions. Sophia sat frozen as the Blackwood family tore itself apart around her. 28 years of carefully maintained lies were unraveling in real time, and she was the catalyst for their destruction. "This changes nothing," Catherine said, her voice icy with fury. "Sophia may be Richard's biological daughter, but she wasn't raised as part of this family. She has no claim to our inheritance." "Actually," Harold interjected, "she has the only claim that matters, the one granted by Mr. Theodore Blackwood's last will and testament. The inheritance is legal and binding." "We'll contest it," David said frantically. "We'll challenge the will in court. There has to be some way to—" "On what grounds?" Harold asked calmly. Mr. Blackwood was of sound mind when he executed this will. It was properly witnessed and notarized. And most importantly, he had the absolute right to dispose of his property as he saw fit. Sophia finally found her voice. "I never asked for this," she said quietly. "I never wanted any of this. But you're going to take it, aren't you?" Miranda's voice was venomous. "You're going to take everything that should have been ours." Sophia looked around the table at the faces of her newly acknowledged half-siblings. Faces twisted with greed, rage, and desperation. These people had treated her with contempt for her entire life, and now they were angry that their victim had inherited the prize they felt entitled to claim. "I need time to think," Sophia said, standing up on unsteady legs. "This is overwhelming." "Take all the time you need," Harold said kindly. "But understand that the will is effective immediately. You are now the majority owner of Blackwood Industries and all associated assets." As Sophia walked toward the door, Richard's voice stopped her. "Sophia, wait. We can work something out. We're family. We can find a way to share the inheritance, fairly." She turned back to look at him. This man who was her biological father but had never acknowledged her existence. "Family?" she repeated. "When was I ever family to you, Richard? When did you ever treat me like a daughter?" I was trying to protect you," he stammered. "The situation was complicated." "The situation was that you were a coward," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "You let me grow up feeling like I didn't belong because it was easier than taking responsibility for your actions." She looked around the table one final time, taking in the faces of the people who had shaped her life through their rejection and cruelty. "I'll be in touch," she said to Harold, then walked out of the conference room and into her new life as the heir to the Blackwood fortune. The news of Sophia's inheritance spread through Boston's elite social circles like wildfire. Within 48 hours of the will reading, her phone was buzzing constantly with calls from reporters, distant relatives she had never met, and financial advisors eager to manage her newfound wealth. She had turned off her phone and holed up in her apartment, trying to process the seismic shift in her circumstances. Elena arrived on Sophia's doorstep the morning after the will reading, carrying bags of groceries and wearing an expression of fierce maternal protection. "The reporters called me," Elena said as she bustled into Sophia's kitchen. "I told them to go to hell, but I figured you might need some real food and someone to talk to." Sophia sat at her small dining table, still wearing the same navy suit from the previous day, looking shell-shocked and overwhelmed. "Mom, what am I supposed to do with $50 million? I don't know how to be rich." Elena began unpacking groceries with efficient movements. "You're not supposed to be anything, mija. Money doesn't change who you are. It just gives you more options." "Everyone's going to think I'm a fraud," Sophia said, her voice small. "I grew up in this apartment. I shop at Target. I drive a 10-year-old Honda. How am I supposed to run a multi-million-dollar company? The same way you run your caseload at DCF," Elena said firmly. "With intelligence, compassion, and hard work. The only difference is the size of the problems you're solving." Over the next week, Sophia began to understand the scope of her inheritance. Harold Whitman arranged a series of meetings to walk her through her new responsibilities. Blackwood Industries wasn't just a single company. It was a complex web of investments, real estate holdings, manufacturing operations, and charitable foundations. Your role as majority owner, Harold explained during one of their sessions, gives you control over strategic decisions, but the day-to-day operations are handled by professional managers. Your grandfather was very careful to hire competent people who could run the business without his constant oversight. Sophia studied the financial reports spread across Harold's conference table, trying to make sense of profit margins and quarterly projections. What about the other family members? Do they have any role in the company? Richard serves on the board of directors, as do Miranda and James. However, as majority owner, you have the authority to replace board members as you see fit. The implications were staggering. Sophia now had the power to remove her biological father and half-siblings from their positions of influence within the family business. It was a level of control she had never imagined possessing. There's something else you should know, Harold continued. Your grandfather left detailed instructions about his vision for the company's future. He wanted Blackwood Industries to become more socially responsible, to use its resources to address problems like homelessness, education inequality, and healthcare access. Sophia's heart lifted for the first time since the will reading. This was something she could understand, using wealth and influence to help people, rather than simply accumulating more of both. He also left this for you, Harold said, sliding an envelope across the table. He asked me to give it to you once you had time to process the inheritance. Sophia's hands trembled as she opened the envelope and unfolded a letter written in Theodore's familiar handwriting. My dear Sophia, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have learned the truth about your place in our family. I hope you can forgive an old man for waiting so long to set things right. I have watched you for 28 years, seen you struggle for acceptance from people who didn't deserve your respect. You have shown grace under pressure, kindness in the face of cruelty, and strength that humbles me. These are the qualities that built our family fortune, and these are the qualities that will sustain it. Your inheritance comes with a responsibility, not to maintain the status quo, but to transform it. Use this wealth to build the world you want to see, to help the families you've dedicated your life to serving. Be the leader our family has been waiting for, even if they didn't know it. You are not just my heir, Sophia. You are my hope for redemption. With all my love, Grandfather. Sophia wiped away tears as she finished reading. For the first time since Theodore's death, she felt a sense of purpose about her inheritance. This wasn't just about money. It was about continuing the work she had always been passionate about, but with resources she had never dreamed of having. I want to schedule a board meeting, Sophia said, her voice steady with newfound determination. It's time I met with the family. The Blackwood Industries boardroom occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown Boston high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the harbor. Sophia arrived 15 minutes early, wanting to familiarize herself with the space where she would soon be wielding unprecedented power. The conference table was a massive slab of polished mahogany surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent. Oil paintings of previous Blackwood patriarchs lined the walls, their stern faces seeming to judge anyone who dared sit at their table. Richard, Miranda, and James arrived together, their expressions grim and their body language defensive. They took seats on one side of the table, presenting a united front against the interloper who had stolen their inheritance. Catherine followed shortly after, her face a mask of cold politeness. David, the youngest of Sophia's half-siblings, entered last. Unlike the others, he looked more curious than hostile, studying Sophia with an expression she couldn't quite read. Thank you all for coming, Sophia began, surprised by how steady her voice sounded in the intimidating space. I know this situation is difficult for everyone. Difficult? Miranda's laugh was bitter. You've stolen our birthright and destroyed our family. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it. I didn't steal anything, Sophia replied calmly. Theodore made a choice about how to distribute his wealth. I'm as surprised by that choice as you are. Are you? Richard's voice was sharp with accusation. Or did you manipulate a sick old man into changing his will? The accusation stung, but Sophia had expected it. I hadn't spoken to grandfather for months before he died. The will was executed 6 months ago, long before his final illness. She opened her portfolio and withdrew copies of the company's financial reports. But we're not here to relitigate the inheritance. We're here to discuss the future of Blackwood Industries. What future? James demanded. You don't know anything about running a business. You're going to destroy everything our family built. Maybe, Sophia admitted. Or maybe I'm going to build something better. Something that uses our resources to make a real difference in people's lives. She outlined her vision for the company's future. Expanded charitable giving, investment in affordable housing projects, partnerships with social service organizations, and a corporate culture that prioritized social impact alongside financial returns. This is insane, Catherine said when Sophia finished. Businesses exist to make profit, not to solve society's problems. Why can't they do both? Sophia asked. We have more money than any of us could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why not use some of it to address problems that actually matter? Because that's not how business works, Richard said condescendingly. You can't just throw money at social problems and expect them to disappear. I'm not talking about throwing money at problems, Sophia replied. I'm talking about systematic, thoughtful investment in solutions. The kind of long-term thinking that built this company in the first place. David spoke for the first time since entering the room. What kind of solutions? Sophia felt a flicker of hope at his genuine interest. Affordable housing developments that generate reasonable returns while providing quality homes for working families. Job training programs that create skilled workers for our manufacturing operations. Healthcare clinics in underserved communities that improve quality of life while reducing emergency room costs. Those are government programs, Miranda said dismissively. That's not what private companies do. Says who? Sophia challenged. Who decided that businesses can't be forces for positive change? That profit and purpose have to be mutually exclusive. The be not the. Room fell silent as the family processed her words. Sophia could see the wheels turning in their minds, calculating how her vision might affect their own financial interests. What about us? James asked finally. If you're planning to give away millions to charity, what happens to our positions in the company? Our salaries? Our benefits? That depends, Sophia said honestly. I'm willing to work with family members who share my vision for the company's future, but I won't tolerate sabotage or resistance that undermines our ability to achieve our goals. And if we don't share your vision? Richard asked, his voice dangerous. Then you're free to find employment elsewhere, Sophia replied. Blackwood Industries is big enough for people who want to build something meaningful. It's not big enough for people who want to maintain the status quo while complaining about change. The threat hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time in her life, Sophia held power over the people who had spent decades making her feel powerless. The reversal was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. You can't just fire us, Miranda protested. We have contracts, employment agreements. Board positions serve at the pleasure of the majority shareholder, Harold interjected from his seat at the far end of the table. And employment contracts typically include provisions for termination, with cause. What cause? Catherine demanded. Sophia smiled, feeling a surge of confidence she had never experienced in this family's presence. Failure to perform duties in accordance with company policy. And starting today, company policy includes a commitment to social responsibility and ethical business practices. She stood up, gathering her papers with deliberate calm. You have 2 weeks to decide whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. After that, I'll make personnel decisions based on your choices." As she walked toward the door, David's voice stopped her. "Sophia, could I speak with you privately?" She turned back, studying his face for signs of deception or manipulation. David was 26, the baby of the family, and had always been less overtly cruel than his siblings. But Sophia had learned not to trust Blackwood family members based on surface appearances. "What do you want to discuss?" "Your vision for the company," he said, ignoring the sharp looks from his family members. "I'd like to understand it better." 2 days later, Sophia met David at a coffee shop in Cambridge, far from the Blackwood family's usual haunts in Boston's financial district. She chose a table in the back corner, away from curious ears and potential reporters who might be tracking her movements. David arrived on time, looking more casual than she had ever seen him. Instead of his usual expensive suits, he wore jeans and a simple sweater, making him look younger and more approachable. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as he sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I should," Sophia admitted. "Your family hasn't exactly earned my trust." "I know, and I don't blame you for being suspicious." David stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "But I need you to know that not all of us supported the way you were treated over the years." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because I don't remember you ever standing up for me at family gatherings." David's face flushed with shame. "You're right. I was a coward. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid of becoming a target myself if I spoke up." The admission surprised Sophia with its honesty. She had expected denial or excuses, not acknowledgement of complicity. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want to make it right," David said earnestly. "And because I think your vision for the company is exactly what we need." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "I've been working in the manufacturing division for the past 2 years, learning the business from the ground up. Do you know what I've learned? Our factories are in communities that have been destroyed by economic decline. We employ people who are one paycheck away from losing their homes, whose children attend schools that are falling apart, who can't afford health care despite working full-time jobs." Sophia felt a stirring of recognition. This was the David she remembered from childhood. The little boy who had always been more interested in how things worked than in what they cost. "We have the resources to change that," David continued, "not just as a charity, but as a business strategy. When our employees have stable housing and good schools for their kids, they're more productive. When the communities around our facilities are thriving, we have a stable workforce and customer base. And your siblings, your parents, what do they think about your perspective?" David's expression darkened. "They think I'm naive. They say business is about maximizing profit, period. But I've seen what happens when that's your only goal. Communities die, families fall apart, and eventually, the business suffers too." Sophia studied his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. What she saw instead was a young man grappling with his family's legacy and his own conscience. "If I keep you on at the company," she said carefully, "I need to know that you're committed to real change, not just pretty words that make you feel better about your privilege." "I understand," David said, "and I'm prepared to prove my commitment." "How?" David pulled out his phone and showed Sophia a document. "I've been working on a proposal for employee profit sharing and community investment programs. I want to present it to the board as our first major initiative under your leadership." Sophia scrolled through the proposal, impressed by its thoroughness and sophistication. David had clearly put significant time and thought into developing concrete strategies for implementing social responsibility initiatives. "This is good work," she admitted. "But why should I trust you? How do I know this isn't just an elaborate attempt to stay in my good graces while secretly working against me?" David was quiet for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with some internal decision. Finally, he looked directly into her eyes. "Because 28 years ago, You deserve to have someone in that family stand up for you. I was too young and too scared to be that person then. But I'm not too young anymore, and I refuse to be scared." Something in his voice convinced Sophia that his remorse was genuine. She closed the proposal document and handed back his phone. "All right," she said. "You can stay. But understand that I'll be watching everything you do, every decision you make. The first sign that you're working against me or undermining our initiatives, and you're gone." "I understand," David said. "And Sophia, thank you for giving me a chance to be better than my family taught me to be." As Sophia walked back to her car, she felt a cautious optimism for the first time since inheriting the Blackwood fortune. Maybe she wouldn't have to navigate this new world entirely alone. Maybe, despite everything that had happened, she could build something positive from the wreckage of family relationships. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "How did it go with David?" Sophia smiled as she typed her response. "Better than expected. I think I might have found an ally." The reply came back immediately. "Good. You're going to need all the help you can get to change that family. But if anyone can do it, it's you." Over the following weeks, Sophia began to understand the scope of her power and the resistance she would face in wielding it. Miranda, James, and Richard formed an alliance aimed at blocking her initiatives and challenging her authority at every turn. They questioned her decisions in board meetings, leaked negative stories to financial reporters, and lobbied other board members to resist her leadership. But Sophia had advantages they didn't fully appreciate. Her years of working with difficult clients and bureaucratic systems had taught her patience, strategic thinking, and the ability to build coalitions. More importantly, she had the support of the company's senior managers, who were impressed by her vision and commitment to long-term growth over short-term profits. Harold Whitman proved to be an invaluable advisor, helping Sophia navigate the legal and financial complexities of her new role. He also served as a buffer between her and the more aggressive members of the Blackwood family, handling their threats and challenges with the calm professionalism of someone who had dealt with wealthy family disputes for decades. "They're going to escalate," he warned Sophia during one of their weekly meetings. "Richard is talking to other lawyers about challenging the will, and Miranda is spreading rumors about your mental fitness to run the company." "Let them," Sophia said with a confidence that surprised her. "Every day I'm in charge is another day. I can implement changes that improve people's lives. Even if they eventually succeed in removing me, I'll have made a difference." But Sophia was determined not to be removed. She had found her purpose in Theodore's gift, and she wasn't going to let anyone take it away from her. The scared, insecure girl who had spent 28 years trying to earn her family's acceptance was gone, replaced by a woman who understood her own worth and was ready to fight for what she believed in. The final confrontation came 6 months after Sophia inherited the company. Richard had assembled a coalition of minority shareholders and board members in an attempt to force a vote of no confidence in her leadership. The showdown took place in the same boardroom where Sophia had first outlined her vision for the company's future. "The numbers don't lie," Richard said, presenting financial projections that showed decreased short-term profits due to Sophia's social responsibility initiatives. Under Sophia's leadership, the company is sacrificing shareholder value for feel-good programs that don't belong in a business environment. Sophia listened calmly as Richard made his case, flanked by Miranda and James, who nodded agreement with his every point. When he finished, she stood up and walked to the window overlooking Boston Harbor. "You're right about the numbers," she said, without turning around. "Our short-term profits are down because we're investing in long-term sustainability. We're paying fair wages, providing comprehensive benefits, and contributing to community development. These things cost money in the short term." She turned back to face the room, her gaze steady and confident. "But you're wrong about shareholder value. Our employee retention is at an all-time high. Our customer satisfaction scores have improved dramatically, and our reputation in the business community has never been stronger." Sophia activated the room's presentation screen and displayed a series of charts and graphs. More importantly, We're building a business model that will thrive for generations, not just quarters. We're creating sustainable value instead of extracting it. She looked directly at Richard as she delivered her final point. And, unlike previous Blackwood leadership, I'm building a legacy based on what we contribute to the world, not just what we take from it. The vote, when it came, wasn't even close. Sophia's leadership was affirmed by a margin of 8-3, with only Richard, Miranda, and James voting against her. Even some of the traditional board members had been swayed by the company's improved performance and community impact. After the meeting, as the boardroom emptied, David approached Sophia with a smile that reminded her of Theodore's expression when he was particularly pleased about something. "Congratulations," he said. "I think grandfather would be proud." Sophia looked around the boardroom that had once intimidated her, seeing it now as a tool for positive change rather than a symbol of exclusion and rejection. "I think he would be, too," she said. "And I think we're just getting started." 6 months later, Sophia stood in the same spot where she had first learned about her inheritance, but everything had changed. The law office where Harold had read Theodore's will was now buzzing with activity as they prepared to announce the Blackwood Foundation's first major initiative, a $100 million investment in affordable housing and community development. Across New England, Elena stood beside her daughter, beaming with pride as reporters and community leaders gathered to hear about the program that would help thousands of families achieve stable housing and economic security. "You did it, Mija," Elena whispered. "You turned their rejection into something beautiful." Sophia smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared, insecure girl who had once desperate for the Blackwood family's acceptance was gone, replaced by a confident woman who had learned to create her own definition of family and success. She thought about Theodore's letter, about his hope for redemption through her actions. As she looked out at the crowd of people whose lives would be changed by the Foundation's work, Sophia realized that redemption wasn't something you achieved for someone else. It was something you created through your own choices. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sophia said, stepping up to the microphone, "thank you for joining us today. When my grandfather passed away, he left me more than just a financial inheritance. He left me a responsibility to use our family's resources to build the kind of world we want to live in." She looked out at the faces in the crowd, social workers like herself, community activists, elected officials, and residents from the neighborhoods that would benefit from the Foundation's programs. These were her people now, the family she had chosen rather than the one she had been born into. "The Blackwood Foundation represents a new chapter in our family's story," Sophia continued. "A chapter focused not on accumulating wealth, but on sharing it. Not on building walls that separate us from others, but on building bridges that connect us to our community." As applause filled the room, Sophia caught sight of David in the back, clapping enthusiastically. He had become her strongest ally in transforming the company, and his commitment to their shared vision had never wavered. Beside him stood several of the company's senior managers, people who had embraced the culture of social responsibility that Sophia had worked to create. Notably absent were Richard, Miranda, and James. After the failed vote of no confidence, they had gradually distanced themselves from the company, eventually resigning from their board positions rather than support initiatives they fundamentally opposed. Catherine had followed suit, choosing loyalty to her immediate family over engagement with the broader Blackwood legacy. Sophia felt no sadness at their absence. For 28 years, she had tried to earn their acceptance, changing herself to fit their expectations and diminishing her own worth in the process. Now, surrounded by people who valued her vision and supported her goals, she understood that true family wasn't about shared DNA. It was about shared values and mutual respect, NRD. The press conference, Sophia and Elena drove to Theodore's grave in Mount Auburn Cemetery. The headstone was simple despite the family's wealth, just his name, dates, and a quote he had chosen. "A life well lived is measured not by what we accumulate, but by what we contribute." "I brought him something," Elena said, pulling a small, framed photo from her purse. It showed Sophia at her college graduation, beaming with pride as she received her social work degree. "I thought he should see how beautiful you looked when you achieved your dreams." Sophia placed the photo against the headstone, her eyes misting with tears. "I wish he could see what we're building with his gift." "He can see it," Elena said softly. "And he's proud, just like I am." As they walked back to the car, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from David. "Board approved the community health clinic project. Construction starts next month. Grandfather would be thrilled." Sophia smiled, typing back, "He would be. And so am I." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cemetery as they drove away, leaving Theodore to rest in peace, knowing that his legacy was in capable hands. Sophia had learned that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property. It's the opportunity to become the person you were always meant to be. 3 years later, Sophia stood in the renovated community center that housed the Blackwood Foundation's headquarters. The space had once been an abandoned warehouse in one of Boston's most neglected neighborhoods. Now it buzzed with activity: job training programs, after-school tutoring, healthcare services, and community meetings that brought residents together to solve local problems. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, political challenges, and moments when Sophia questioned whether she was really making a difference. But the evidence was undeniable. Unemployment in the surrounding area had dropped by 30%. High school graduation rates had improved, and property values were rising as the community became safer and more vibrant. "Ms. Martinez?" A young voice interrupted her thoughts. Sophia turned to see Maria Santos, a teenager whose family had been among the first to benefit from the Foundation's housing program. "I wanted to thank you before I leave for college." Sophia's heart swelled with pride. Maria had been struggling academically when they first met, her potential limited by the chaos of unstable housing and family financial stress. The Foundation's comprehensive support, stable housing, tutoring, mentorship, and college prep programs had helped her earn a full scholarship to Boston University. "You don't need to thank me, Maria," Sophia said warmly. "You did the hard work. You earned that scholarship." "But I couldn't have done it without the Foundation's help," Maria insisted. "My mom says you understand what it's like to feel like you don't belong anywhere. But you taught us that we can create our own belonging." The words hit Sophia with unexpected force. This was exactly what she had hoped to accomplish, not just providing financial assistance, but helping people understand their own worth and potential. "What are you planning to study?" Sophia asked. "Social work," Maria said with a grin. "I want to help families the way you helped mine." As Sophia watched Maria walk away, she reflected on how her own journey had come full circle. The girl who had once felt like an outsider in her own family had created a new kind of family, a community of people committed to lifting each other up rather than tearing each other down. Her phone buzzed with a call from David, who was now the company's chief operating officer and Sophia's closest collaborator in running both Blackwood Industries and the Foundation. "Sophia, you need to see this," he said, his voice tight with excitement. "The Harvard Business Review wants to do a cover story about our model of socially responsible capitalism. They're calling it the Blackwood Revolution." Sophia laughed, remembering Miranda's accusation that she would destroy the family business. "I guess we proved them wrong." "We did more than prove them wrong," David said. "We proved that business can be a force for good when it's guided by the right values." That evening, Sophia sat in her new office at the Foundation headquarters, looking out at the neighborhood that had become a symbol of what was possible when resources were combined with genuine commitment to change. Her walls were decorated not with portraits of ancestors, but with photos of families who had achieved stability through the Foundation's programs, children who had graduated from college, and community spaces that had been transformed from blight to beauty. On her desk sat 2 items that reminded her of her journey: Theodore's letter which she reread whenever she faced difficult decisions, and the small framed photo Elena had left at his grave, a reminder of the dreams that had brought her to this moment. Sophia picked up her phone and dialed Elena's number. "How was your day, mija?" Elena asked, her voice warm with the love that had sustained Sophia through every challenge. "Perfect," Sophia said, meaning it completely. Absolutely perfect. As she prepared to leave the office, Sophia took one last look around the space that had become the headquarters of her life's work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference, and new chances to prove that sometimes the greatest inheritance is the opportunity to choose who you become. The scared little girl who had once desperately wanted to belong to a family that didn't want her was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had learned to create her own legacy, one built not on blood or birthright, but on the radical idea that everyone deserves dignity, opportunity, and a chance to write their own story. Sophia Martinez Blackwood, she had chosen to hyphenate her name as a bridge between her past and future, locked the office door, and stepped out into the Boston evening, ready to continue building the world she wanted to live in. The DNA test that had revealed her true parentage had given her an inheritance worth $50 million. But the work she had chosen to do with that inheritance had given her something infinitely more valuable: the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The Blackwood family had spent generations accumulating wealth. Sophia had learned to transform it into something far more precious: hope, opportunity, and the unshakable belief that every person has the potential to rise above their circumstances when given the chance. As she walked through the neighborhood that had become her second home, greeted by residents whose lives had been touched by her work, Sophia understood that this was what true family looked like. Not the people who shared your DNA, but the people who shared your dreams and supported your efforts to make them real. The inheritance that had seemed like a curse had become the greatest blessing of her life, not because of the money itself, but because of the opportunity it provided to become the person she had always been meant to be, and that person was someone who belonged not to a family defined by exclusion and judgment, but to a community built on inclusion and hope. The DNA test results that had changed everything were now framed in her apartment, not as a symbol of victory over her biological family, but as a reminder that sometimes the truth sets you free in ways you never expected. Sophia had learned that the most important inheritance isn't what you receive from others. It's what you choose to create for yourself and pass on to the next generation. Walking home through the city she loved, surrounded by the evidence of positive change and genuine community, Sophia Martinez Blackwood knew that her grandfather's greatest gift hadn't been $50 million. It had been the chance to discover that she was worthy of love, respect, and success, not because of who her parents were, but because of who she had chosen to become.